나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. It's a little chilly this morning in Mississippi, so got a little bit extra. Wearing a little bit extra, a shawl, just to help keep me warm. I think we'll just start reading the Anko Kikigaki. These were notes purportedly made. I say purportedly because there's still some discussion as to how authentic these documents are, as they didn't enter the scholarship of Buddhism until about 250 years or so after Nichiren's passing. That doesn't mean they're not authentic. It just means that there's questions as to the dates they were written. There's no holographic of them in their original form extant. They were added to the canon, in other words, of Nichiren's teachings long after he passed away. But some people are saying the dates really aren't when they were added, but they were written in the time of Nichiren, in the last couple of years of Nichiren. So certainly the content of both the Anko Kikigaki and the Ongokuden both seem to place it in the last couple of years of Nichiren's lifetime, which is the perspective that the writer, whether it was actually, in this case, Nico with one K, these are notes taken in the last years of Nichiren's life as he really focused in on his senior disciples to be the ones with the charge, the mission, the responsibility of continuing Nichiren's proselytizing of the Lotus Sutra Buddhism and how to understand it, how to practice it, so on and so forth. So these would have been teachings directly of Nichiren's own experience to these senior priests, so that they had a foundational core that Nichiren could rely on, a point of view, an understanding, a teaching intelligence that would maintain the course of what he had been doing most of his life, right? So he's turning over the core materials, the foundational thinking, to his 6 senior disciples, so that they keep the teaching integral and clear in its form. As we know, one of the 6, not too long after Nichiren passed, decided, for whatever reason, and we've talked about that already, he didn't agree with the other 5. They had a big falling out, a schism developed between him and the other 5, and he left Minobu, which was the center of Nichiren's proselytizing for the last decade or so of his life. And he got as far away from them as he could and went to Mount Fuji and started what's known as the Fuji School. And that had several branches that broke off from it, one of which is Shoshu. But they're not the only ones. They're just the one that most people know about. While the other 5 expanded throughout Japan, the Minobu School, Mount Minobu School, and of which Nichiren Shu is a part, amongst other sects. So, just all of that is so that you understand the voice in which this document is written, leaving aside questions of how authentic the writings are. Let's just read them and see if they resonate as true, given all of the scholarship we've already read through and interpreted on this channel. The hundreds of videos on the Go Show, which there's more coming. The entire discussion of the Threefold Lotus Sutra, the opening, closing, and all of the 28 chapters, along with other scholarship from Nagarjuna to the Vimalakirti, and several other sutras. We've gotten a pretty good education on the fundamentals of Buddhism by now. So as we read this, we can read it with a critical eye and ear and think, does this sound like Nichiren? Or does this sound like somebody interpreting Nichiren for their own gains or agenda, right? By now, we should be pretty good at that, right? So we started reading yesterday, and we got to the paragraph where this document says, "Now is the time to spread the 7 characters Namu Myoho Renge Kyo of the final Dharma age in order to profit the beings and enable them to gain benefit." And I stopped there and I did my rant about it's 7 characters, not 6, right? So let's continue from there. Therefore, it goes on, to mix other practices with this daimoku would be an error. So that's a very important statement, and certainly sounds like Nichiren's voice, that to do other types of meditation or other rituals, if you will, under the guise of Buddhism is no longer effective. It would be an error, to quote him. And that definitely sounds like Nichiren. Go back to the Goshos on the errors in 8 schools. That he identified all the errors of the current schools and sects in his time, in his area, of which there were 8 major schools, including several Nembutsu-type schools, Pure Land and Pure Word and Zen and others. He picked on those a lot, but he discussed all 8 that were extant at his time. And so here he says to mix other practices with the daimoku, because some of his lay believers would say, well, I believe in what Nichiren's doing, so I'll add chanting the daimoku to my chanting of Amida and my contemplation that's more like Zen. And they were mixing and matching, right? Which people generally do out of fear, because they're worried that they're just trying to cover their bases, right? But the point is, and we read this over and over again, is that Buddhist practice and what Shakyamuni taught and made as obvious as he could is that enlightenment is for this moment, this here and now. It's not for where I go after I die, which is nowhere. It's not for successive lifetimes, because that's what we experience in samsara moment to moment. It's not some extended rebirthing or what's the word? Reincarnation into something else. That's all irrelevant to Buddhism. It's antithetical to Buddhism. Buddhism is about impermanence. Nothing stays the same ever. Our idea that things last through time is our primary illusion. It's what we create our own suffering from, because we think we possess things, own things, and that's our method of identifying ourselves. Our identity is all-consuming to us, and we identify ourselves as separate from everything else we identify. It's a trick of samsara, and it makes us stressed out and creates all of our suffering. So, it is time to hold with one's body the great mandala of this wonderful Dharma, to contemplate it with one's mind, and to chant its daimoku with one's mouth. Accordingly, at the head of the 28 chapters forming the entire sutra, we place the daimoku, forming the title, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And then he's going to go into the introductory chapter 1. So we're going to go into the Lotus Sutra's chapters and hear Nichiren's verbal notes to his 6 senior disciples. Myoho Renge Kyo, Introductory, Chapter 1. The transmission of Master Shuan says, the essence of all the sutras is the 5 characters Myoho Renge Kyo. He didn't say the essence of the Lotus Sutra. He didn't say the essence of this particular teaching. He's saying the essence of all the sutras, everything Shakyamuni ever taught throughout his lifetime. The essence of all of those teachings are the 5 characters Myoho Renge Kyo. Right there, that changes the character of what the Daimoku means as we instantiate our Buddha mind. That in point of fact, though the Lotus Sutra is the ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni, what he coalesces in that self-actualizing teaching, the teaching of his own enlightenment, is that teaching and everything that came before it, obviating one more time that all of the sutras he's ever taught, all of the sermons that he's ever taught, were in service to building a capacity to understand, educating up to accomplishing this Lotus Sutra, this formula, this method for actualizing, invoking, and experiencing Buddha. So by that, chanting this Myoho Renge Kyo is actually invoking everything he's taught. Makes sense, right? It also states, one practice is all practices. All are encompassed in this samadhi. A samadhi being that we don't chant it just as an entertainment. That when we chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, we actually enter a different mind state, a mind state that transcends our samsaric identification. Samadhi is a profound contemplation, meditation. This is why you've heard me call chanting an active meditation rather than a somnambulant one, right? The samadhi referred to here indicates the 2 kinds of practices of the Lotus Sutra, those that have formed and those that are formless. According to this principle, the practice of reading and reciting the sutra is the threefold contemplation in a single mind encompassed in a Dharma container. All the sutras in this commentary refers, speaking close at hand, to those of the flower ornament, agama, extended vaipulya, and prajna periods, and speaking more distantly to all the sutras preached since the time of the Buddha, victorious through great penetrating knowledge. So restating the same thing as we just talked about with more specificity. In terms of the origin teaching, we've talked a lot about that lately. Apart from the Fathoming the Lifespan chapter, the lifespan of the Tathagata, it goes by several titles, right? Everything else is to be reckoned as all the sutras, quote unquote. Essence, quote unquote, is interpreted as being like the sun and moon in the sky, a great king on earth, and the spirit and eyes of a person. These other sutras are the leaves and branches of Myoho Renge Kyo. One practice means that all practices are encompassed by the single practice of the wonderful Dharma. Dharma container means that all dharmas are contained within the 5 characters of the Daimoku. This being the case, all Buddhas of the 3 time periods and 10 directions, Bodhisattva's superior conduct, and the others, the great heavenly king Brahma, Indra, and the 4 Deva kings, the 10 Rakshasa daughters, Amaterasu Omikami, great Bodhisattva Hachiman, the deities of the 21 Sano shrines, and in addition, all the gods of Japan, both lesser and greater, protect and guard the practitioner of this sutra. This is clearly explained in the 5th roll of the Lotus Sutra. It is like a shadow and a body, or a sound and its echo. The 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra are like the shadow and the echo, while the 5 characters of the Daimoku are like the body and the sound. So, it sounds technical, but it's really not so technical, is it? It sounds like, if these are notes and the words of Nichiren, and they certainly sound like the words of Nichiren, it's sounding like a summation of everything we've already learned from Nichiren. So it's entirely plausible that in his final years, this is dated supposedly around 1280, and we know that Nichiren passed away in 1282, so about 2 years, that he's now trying to coalesce what he's done for decades into core concepts that his 6 senior disciples really ingrain into their thinking. Because as much as they can have scholarship, just like Nichiren, study all of these sutras, understand the history and the evolution of all of the teachings of Shakyamuni, and the scholarship of the Lotus Sutra specifically, from the time of Chi'i and prior, but Chi'i is a landmark time period in China where the canon was substantiated and put into proper order. And through all of the teachers for 600 years before Nichiren's advent, including teachers in Japan, like Saicho or Dengyo Daishi, and others, demonstrating once again the central point of why the Daimoku is the singular practice for the modern era. And so, like the focal point of an umbrella, it speaks to the entirety of the structure, right? So, well, this is interesting. I'm going to go on reading rather than babble. As for the sound of our chanting, the Daimoku, there is no place in the worlds of the 10 directions where it fails to penetrate. Though our own voice represents only a small sound, when we put it into the great sound of the Daimoku and chant it, there is no place in the this word has always given me trouble. The trichiliocosm, where it cannot reach, the 3,000 realms. To illustrate, though one's own breath produces only a small sound, when one blows into a conch shell, it resounds at a distance, and though the sound produced by one's hand in sleight when one strikes a drum is slight. When one strikes a drum, it echoes far. This represents the vital doctrine of the single thought moment that is 3,000 realms. Because this is such an auspicious sutra, how could those who slander it not fall into the hell of excessive suffering? These slanderers are evil teachers such as Honen, Kobo, and the others. So Nichiren's already railed against many of these contemporaries of his who deviate from the meaning and the stature of the Lotus Sutra to practice other, mudras, mantras, all sorts of things going on at that time. And so to hear him reiterated here, no great surprise, right? But it's interesting, the examples given here, and I think we've heard these in other go-shos as well. The nature of chanting the daimoku, why we make the sound, why we use active meditation rather than other practices, is because of the all-encompassing nature of this practice, the daimoku. I've talked to you before of, and there are many videos on this channel you can look up on chanting, why chanting, the daimoku, and how we use the mandala as a focal point to get our eye consciousness to be undistracted, our oral consciousness hearing the daimoku, the development of the sound, the feeling in our bodies, the breathing, right? With our knowledge of the sutra becomes an incredible, all our consciousness come into line and open directly our Amala consciousness, our Buddha-ness, right? So this is the function of chanting daimoku, and this is why all of the prior teachings and the provisional teachings that lead us to this teachings are all encompassed within it, right? And then the next area is called the lotus blossom. The lotus blossom represents original cause and original effect. This original cause and original effect are the single thought moment that is the 3,000 realms. We've talked about this before as well. They are, and so in a way, this right here, the lotus blossom, is Renge of the daimoku. So he's really taking apart the daimoku here and relating it to our study and how it encompasses, in other words, those, as I've said before, Renge, it's those characters are not just like letters of an alphabet. They're conceptual containers. And even to say Renge or the lotus blossom is a dilution. So he's explaining why the lotus blossom, or the idea of a lotus blossom, extends to a great body of the teachings and understanding of why we use daimoku to instantiate our Buddha nature. Follow? They are the cause and effect that are originally inherent, not the sort of cause and effect that just now have their beginning. Right? So Renge extends into the entire karma realm, the energies that you and everything is manifest of and from, and the way that we express that manifestation through our Buddha mind, Renge, right? The doctrine of the Buddha's original attainment of enlightenment, countless dust particle kalpas ago, reveals this matter. And again, that's that analogy of time, beginningless time, that this has been the nature of all phenomena since phenomena materialized. And we are of the same nature. Original cause and original effect are the daimoku, you see, which sows the seed of Buddhahood. Effect of original effect refers to the attainment of Buddhahood, which is what we do when we chant the daimoku. While cause refers to conviction and acceptance, always primary. When one embraces this sutra, that is original cause, this original cause is itself the attainment of Buddhahood, which is called original effect. Concerning the matter essential for Nichiren's disciples and lay supporters, we take original cause rather than original effect as our teaching. Without original cause, there can be no original effect. Original cause indicates the cause for wisdom and represents the stage of verbal identity, myojisoku. Original effect, being the effect, refers to the stage of ultimate identity, kyokyo soku. The stage of ultimate identity is another name for the original enlightenment, that is the ninth consciousness. So I think we've just covered a lot of meat. So that will be the starting point for the next video. But what do you think? Does that explain, does that require more explanation? If you have more questions than answers in your head right now, put them in the comments. But as I read this, I'm remembering all of the videos where I've discussed with you the Gosho and the Lotus and several other sutras. He's really condensing everything into core principles. So, and this may be the first time I've read something directly talking about the ninth consciousness. I'll admit to that. But yeah, so original cause, original effect. Let's talk about that just for a moment. Where are we time-wise? Okay, we're good. What he's identifying is something that I've talked about in different words, and what I just mentioned about, you remember my talks about energy and how everything is just, when scientists talk about particles, for instance, or atoms or molecules or whatever, what they're actually discussing or trying to verbalize is forms and states of energy, coalescing, amalgamating, right? That everything ultimately can be described as these amalgams or states of energy, from a photon to quantum fields, where these energies coalesce, or they either coalesce into something, some other state of extant energy, or they dissolve and become non-expressed. They go quiescent. And from that point, that seesaw, if you will, of exists, doesn't exist, that's the cause. You follow? That initial formation, which is the language of Buddhism, and the formed. You've got formation in the middle, you've got energy over here, and you've got forms over here. The energy transferring into formation is the cause. And the formation turning into form is the effect. Cause effect. Do you see how granular this gets? Now, I know we tend to talk about cause and effect as I spoke negatively about this, and now I'm getting retribution from that cause, and these ugly things are happening. That's the effect. But that's a superficial understanding. And it's kind of, because of that, it's kind of mystical. And it can be confusing. It can seem kind of magical. And so I want to disabuse you of that superficial understanding of cause and effect. Cause and effect is instantaneous. It either happens or it doesn't. And they happen as the same thing, just like time space is the same thing. Mouth's getting dry. So cause and effect are two sides of the same coin. You've heard that analogy many, many times. But the coin itself is what causes confusion here. The reality is the coin is also an effect. The cause is something so fundamental that it challenges our minds to perceive of the nature of all phenomena being from this formation of energies. This account the coalescing, the merging, the it's almost like volition, like a will to exist. The formation is like an idea coming into being. And the moment the idea gels, that's the effect. You see? So this is very, very fundamental aspect of all phenomena. Of anything that we can say exists, has existed, and does exist through this process of formation into form. And so if this is the fundamental truth of all things, which by knowing, understanding, and perceiving, we can release our obsession of identification with stuff, then by invoking it through chanting the Daimoku, Myoho Renge Kyo, we can then touch the eternal, I wish I had said that, the eternal in respect to the vast time scale of the universe, which we can't fathom. There is a beginning and argument, aside, a cycle, a return to the beginning constantly of the universe. Again, Roger Penrose's conformal cyclical cosmology is a great visualization of what that is like. This energy that we're formed of, that the universe is formed of, has a quiescent state. And that is without time. So that's eternal is a terrible word for that because it has so much charisma attached to it. So let's just, again, call it, as the Buddhists do, beginningless. Because beginning is instantiation. You see? So wherever there is an experience of existence, there therefore has to be a beginning for that. A beginning is a measure of time-space, just like an end is. And we are little tiny timelines within that timeline, right? Make sense? So, by touching our minds to that beginningless beginning, we in fact preempt everything made, including ourselves, and therefore invoke that knowing, that perception, and it folds into our current perception. It's massive. It's hard to, well, obviously, we've repeated this many, many times. It's impossible to talk about. It's something one can only experience, right? So once again, Nichiren is making sure that this idea doesn't fall through the cracks, that the power of chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo in this latter age is the invocation of that fundamental truth. And that by invoking it while in this samsaric life, this physical form, we alter, we change, we transform our samsaric life experience into the life of original cause, observing an amazing effect of original cause, which, by our perception, removes our identification, our deep attachment, our chemical, biological, energetic attachment to all of the things that we perceive in our lives. Those things become just as much our formation as anything else. They're not separate. We don't identify with them. We understand our common flow. So there's no fear of losing identity. There's no fear of being separate from. There's no fear of being alone, to being lesser or more than, because we're all of the same flow of energy. That's a very relaxing kind of place. Oh, competition is an illusion. Owning, having is an illusion. Those are samsaric baubles of entertainment and delusion. That all is me, and I am everything, just as you are, just as we are. I know it's starting to sound mystical, but it's not. It's an actual perception of equanimity. And if there is equanimity, then there's no longer a struggle to have, to be, to own. Because it's all just happening. That can be a very satisfying place, emotional place, psychological place, right? Because there are no friends and enemies. There are people who work toward the support of this magnificent life, and there are people who create obstacles. They're creating obstacles for themselves, certainly, but those obstacles can bleed into your experience of life. So we need to learn how to deflect those, stop attracting those with our own negative energies, and they just won't come toward us. It's like magnets, right? Magnets repel and attract. And our karma, our magnetic fields, if you will, from the energy of our life, just like the energy of everything around us, if it's strong, if it knows itself, if it's unperturbed by all these little baubles of nervousness and fear and so on, it becomes a much stronger field. Then it attracts what it needs and repels what it doesn't. This is a life of bodhisattva. And as much as we attract or repel, we affect the universe, the world, the community, the life around us. This is why our life changes. The longer we practice, the more certain people seem to accrue in our lives that support our Buddha nature, and those that would impinge on that and return us to possession and suffering and fear seem to be repelled. They don't show up anymore. This is a deeper, more profound experience of this practice. It is what in samsara we are actually committed to doing. And this is a bodhisattva practice because, as I've said before, the more you instantiate that in your life, the more you affect, influence the life around you without saying a word. to others. So don't stress about being a great teacher. Accomplish your own enlightenment, and that alone will teach others. What we don't want to do is withdraw from society, because then we cut off our Buddha, our Bodhisattva path. And we need that path in order to enlarge our confidence in our Buddha mind, right? So anyway, this got kind of deep. So please voice your thoughts in the comments, so I can know. Do I need to use a different rhetoric to make these teachings obvious, or are you enjoying the elucidations of this kind of discussion? Let me know either way. I'm curious to know. The more I read of these documents, the more my own practice grows in confidence. Confidence not only because I read these things and they make sense, but confidence also because I've had these insights over years and years, and when I read some of these things, they're so validating, right? Oh, I am doing this right. Or, I know where I slide over here, right? It's very important to our practice. This is why study is one of the 3 pillars of practice. It helps build our confidence, build our resilience against doubt, right? We want that kind of practice where there's just no doubt. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Download the podcast. Please like, subscribe, share. Keep your practice strong. That's all that matters. Whenever your mind feels confused about anything, just open your Butsudan, sit down, take a moment, breathe, look at your mandala, chant to invoke your Buddha mind. I don't care if it's 10 seconds. Just do it. Over time, your confidence will build. You'll spend more time chanting. You'll get major insights. Sometimes lots of little insights you're not even sure you're getting. And then boom, some major insight will happen, and your life is changing right now. Make every cell in your body instantiated, manifest from your Buddha mind. Circumvent that karma. Go right to the root, the cause, the original cause. Right? All right, that's enough for today. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.